The Shepnaz podcast begins now.
You're listening to the Shepnaz podcast, a podcast by Shepherd Church. Everything we do at Shepherd is to connect our community in a meaningful relationship with Christ, and we are expecting great things. My name's Joey, and I'll be your host. Pastor Shelly joins me today as we look at Chapter 8 of Rob McCorkle's book, Life and Death, The Power of Words. Plus, after that, we'll get to know Pastor Shelly a little bit better too, so stick around and let's dive in. Pastor Shelly, thanks for being here today. How are you doing?
Good. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah? All right. Well, hey, let's just dive right in because we're going to talk more about you, which I know you're really excited about, later on in this episode. But let's dive in. We are in the midst of 21 days of prayer and fasting here at Shepherd Church. And we've been looking at Rob McCorkle's book, The Power of Words, or Life and Death, The Power of Words. And each day we've been using one of the chapters to help us kind of focus our time of growth. So your chapter that you are going to talk to us about is called No More Gossip. Would you be able to just like kind of summarize that, kind of what was Rob kind of getting at, and what are we learning from that?
Yeah, I think to start, there was a little quote that really stuck out to me. He said, "In the needless gush of words, we run the risk of gossip." And I was like, I'm done. I got nothing else to say. But Proverbs 10:19 says, "Sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues." And it reminded me early, I wasn't raised in the church.
Okay.
But when I became a Christian, it was serious. Like day and night, flip the switch.
Sure.
And I was with a friend, new friend. I was new in the church, and she was just like complaining and having grief in a public setting. And I can remember in my young, vibrant stupidity saying, "I think you're gossiping, and that's sin."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was not a big moment in my life. But I'll never forget her response was, "Well, it's true. If it's true, it's not gossip." And so what I love about this chapter is Rob McCorkle really helps you understand what gossip is.
Good.
So I like this. We'll dive in here. I think you brought up in a previous session, 2 Corinthians 12:20, but I want to repeat it. "For I'm afraid," Paul said, "for I'm afraid when I come, I may not find you as I want you to be, and you may not find me as you want me to be.
Wow.
I fear that there may be discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, slander, gossip, arrogance, and disorder." And I think gossip is one of those sins in the church that we kind of brush off as not a serious sin.
Yeah.
But boy, is it. And we'll find that out here. Rob says, "It is good to speak in honor of one who is not present in the conversation." And I immediately thought of you because I've had conversations with my son saying, "Oh, this new guy we have on staff, he's a worship leader here in town," and said he fits he fits the bill. So we're talking, yes, I'm trying to pumping you up. But I remembered that conversation as I was reading this, and he says, "But gossip is slanderous in nature and can destroy the reputation of other individuals." He also gives the Greek word that I'm not going to try to pronounce for gossip, and its long definition is to whisper secrets, to give a malicious report about another person.
Yeah, true or not, right?
Exactly. It can be true.
Whispering secrets doesn't mean it has to be fake.
Or even worse, part true.
Oh, man.
Right? So he then also states that gossip not only is sharing negativity about someone, but it's specifically, this one, man, gets deep. He says it summons the enemy into our conversation. And he does that when Paul speaks about malicious gossips. He was calling out people who were destroying the character of another in the same manner that the devil would. And so it's like, okay, now we're coming into agreement with the accuser of the brethren. And that's pretty serious stuff. And yet it can look so not serious in the moment. It can look like concern or whatever. It can get out of hand really fast because in the gush of words, we may gossip. If we can look into the spiritual world, too. I was thinking about this. You remember the old Frank Peretti books where he's talking about what was happening in the
present darkness.
Yeah. And he's describing all these. I know, right?
Yeah.
But if you could do that, I think this is cool. Rob states that the enemy uses gossipers as pawns, but gossip is no game. But I had this visual of like a chessboard, and when we give the enemy permission, because it's our mouths that
Sure.
do that. We become his pawns, and he moves us around on that chessboard. And the sad thing about gossip is, too, it tends to exaggerate and distort the truth. So even if you may be saying something somewhat truthful, it can get out of hand really fast. And the last thing he said, I thought that was good, that I think this is kind of a clincher to help us understand the importance, is that the victims of gossip that he's known over the years, that their wounds go deep and wide. And I think many of us in the church have experienced what it feels like to be gossiped about, and we know the pain that it brings. And I think that experience alone should cause us to want to stop. Yeah. You know, we're all human. You know, we're all frail. We all have tendencies, but reminding ourselves the damage that can be done should be a good motivation.
Yeah. Thank you. I think about so if you don't know, if you're listening, in our church tradition, we have church membership, and in my last church that I was a part of, when we would bring in new members, and we would do that on a Sunday morning, and they would come up, and we would it was sort of a tradition, ritual, whatever you want to call it. But my pastor would spend more time focusing on gossip for new members than anything.
Wow.
Because how we treat each other, how we speak about each other, like if you think about a church as a family, that sort of, those things that we whisper behind the scenes really tend to bring division and cause strife, and a church cannot be healthy and grow when that is happening.
The common.
Yeah, and so my pastor, he was very much like, this is what it means to be a part of this family, is that like we're not going to do that.
So good.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of other things that we talk about in membership, but we really focus on that because a lot of other things can get worked out.
Sure.
If you just speak openly and honestly with each other, rather than in closed channels behind the scenes and gossiping. So
it's good.
Very good. Hey, so Shelly, is there anything that maybe stuck out or challenged you throughout that reading?
Two things, and it was interesting. It was out of a conversation I had with you, actually, and I think I made the comment that gossip is like one of the sneakier devils in the church or something like that. And I think it's because we can cloak gossip in self-righteous ways. Mm-hmm. Like we can say, I have a prayer request. Did you hear,
For sure,
Bob and Susie are having marital problems? I think he had an affair. I don't know for sure. So this prayer request all of a sudden goes very wrong. We can say we're trying to expose truth. We can say we felt somebody really needed to know. And it has nothing to do with the position at all. There are times where we have to go to correct people, to the correct people to discuss things, and we don't want to brush things under the rug. But anyways, in the church, I think sometimes we spiritualize that and try to make it okay. Yeah. Second, this for me was the clincher for myself, is to take a good look inward and ask the Lord to show us what is the motivation behind my wanting to say something. What is the motivation to, for whatever reason we're going to have this conversation? Does it just fill a conversation? You just want to be a part of it. Does it make us feel like we have something important to contribute? Does it make someone else's weakness make me feel better about myself? Now we're starting to really dig deep, right? Does making that person seem smaller make me feel more in control or whatever? Does exposing someone else's sin make me feel a little more holy? And so we have to kind of really get on our faces before God with these things and say, Lord, show me. Show me what it is that makes me tend to go down this road. And, it's just being really honest before the Lord. And I think it's awesome.
Good. So what step maybe are you going to take, or in the same way, what could people who are listening to this, what steps could they take practically to get out from under this kind of gossip that tends to really, all walks of life kind of follow us around? Like,
I wouldn't recommend that you say you're gossiping, I think you're sinning. That's probably,
yeah.
hopefully from 30-some years ago, I've learned a little bit.
Little humility.
Humility goes a long way. That's right. I will tell you that every chapter of this book is chewing me up in a good way. I'm loving it, and there's so much to glean. But I feel like gossip specifically, he does give 3 good points. He said, first, in a conversation, if you feel that prick of the Holy Spirit, you feel that sense that, wait a minute, that caution, ask yourself, wait a minute, is this gossip? Are we exposing somebody's negative attributes in this conversation? So that's number 1. 2, be bold enough to say, I don't think we should be speaking about this person like this. Be bold enough to say, we should, take ownership. You're part of it. If you're a listener or you're a speaker, you're part of the conversation. So you can say, hey, I don't think this is a good thing to be doing. It's softer than saying, you sinner. So, and then, the best, number 3, I love this, suggest that perhaps we just stop and pray for that person in the moment. And that's something we've been talking about in worship team is, hey, if in the moment, in a rehearsal, in a situation where you just really sense that you need to pray for this person, just stop what you're doing and do it. And we're trying to make that the normal for us in our area of ministry. So I like that. For me personally, also, can I share 2 scriptures?
Course.
These are 2 scriptures the Lord uses in my life a lot over the years, but it really hit me this last week a lot about controlling the tongue. In Psalm 32:8-9, he says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go, and I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. Do not be like the horse or the mule, which have no understanding but must be controlled by bit and bridle, or they will not come to you. And I feel like the Lord's saying, hey, I have an intimate way to deal with this sin problem. I have a loving way. Or we could do it the hard way. If you want a bit and bridle, we can do it the hard way. And then the other scripture goes right with that, Isaiah 30:21. Again, God is speaking, and he says, whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way. Walk in it. And I can't tell you in my own life times where I'll be in the middle of a conversation and I have that sense, that feeling that God's saying, whoa, and I just bear right on through the gush of many words. And so I would say for me personally, I don't want the bit and the bridle.
Yeah.
I don't want the bit and the bridle. I want the real,
good.
I want the Spirit of God to be in control. And so I'm really pressing in to do better, to be better. And ultimately, I want to be more transformed into the image of Christ.
You said something a minute ago, and it made me think of how we often think of gossip as just an active, like you have to be an active participant in it. But you said something a minute ago that made me think that there's an active and a passive participant sometimes. And I think it's important for us to know that in a conversation, silence in a conversation is agreement. And so sometimes we think if we're in a conversation and things are going off the rails, well, as long as we're not contributing to the conversation, that it's not us, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I think what you said was really important, was that, like, be bold to speak up.
Yeah, in love.
Yeah,
it's not a condemnation thing.
Standing in that conversation in silence. Oh, well, we were talking about that. Oh, but Joey was there too.
He was in the room.
He knows he was there. He agrees with me.
Yeah.
And it's because I just stood there.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was young, I was 22, fresh out of college, and I walked in on a conversation in the church lobby with board members that I was really shocked to hear what they were talking about. But I was so young and so new and had no idea how to...
You should have said, you sinners.
Yeah. I had no idea what to do. And I wonder if, in retrospect, if when they would talk about that the next time, like, oh, Joey's on our team on this. I would not like to be on that team.
Yeah, they didn't get the correction.
And so I think that's important.
Yeah.
And so you said that to be bold enough to speak up, that, like, being silent in the presence of gossip is just like you are actively participating in
Getting
it.
sucked into the vortex.
Yeah. It's so good. Do you have anything else that was great? Great.
I don't think I have anything else. I mean, except I think in humility, we all have to be honest with ourselves that all of these chapters, we're all capable of being that.
Yeah.
And we're all, we have to have our guard up. We're working out our salvation with fear and trembling. It's a very personal journey, and it's between you and the Holy Spirit. And if you're feeling those sense of conviction, man, get on your face. Spend that time with Him. There's
That's
nothing
good.
better.
That's good. Well, awesome. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Pastor Shelly about some of her story and what God's doing in her life, so don't go anywhere. As we conclude our 21 days of prayer and fasting in January of 2023, we want to invite you and your family to a praise and worship night on January 29th at 5 p.m. There we will sing, we will pray, and we will thank God for all that He has done. And as we anticipate what He is going to do, we'll seek Him. So don't miss it on January 29th at 5 p.m. right here at Shepherd. If you haven't taken the step of baptism in your life yet, we want to invite you that on February 5th, you could take that step. Baptism is a moment in which you're able to say that Jesus has changed my heart on the inside and I want to proclaim it to the world. If you'd like to sign up for baptism, you can do so by filling out the Connect card, letting us know that, or you can go to our website and on the right-hand side under Contact Us, you can click the link that says, I want to be baptized. Pastor will reach out to you and we will get that scheduled. Well, hey, welcome back. Pastor Shelly, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for being a part of this today. We had Pastor Zach on, and you and Zach started at the same time. Was it the same?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so
shoulder to shoulder.
So still relatively new at Shepherd, and so I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about your family, so people who are listening can know a little bit more about your family, some
Sure.
things that you don't always get to share from the platform on Sundays. Tell us about your family.
Well, I am married to Dan, who is probably one of the most just very grounding persons in my life. It's quite cool how we complement each other. We have 3 boys. Our oldest lives here in town. He's a worship leader, fantastic young man, married with 2 children, our grandchildren.
Yep.
We have our middle son up in Worcester, and they have a 2-year-old little guy. And then our youngest son lives out in LA, and he's in the music industry. So kind of cool thing, by moving to Columbus, he actually ends up traveling through Columbus from time to time. I've seen him more since we've moved here because of these odd, little trips he ends up getting on. So, but he's still single, and yeah, that's our family.
Well, hey, so you've been here for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about what all happens at Shepherd that you get to be a part of, but kind of give us maybe a brief roadmap of kind of what God's done throughout your life and where you've been in ministry and how you've seen God move over the years.
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, I was not raised in the church. I was not raised in a Christian home, but it's interesting in my childhood, the sensitivity that I had to a sense that God existed. And I don't know if that's just because it was on TV more back then. You heard nuances of that. But I already began to have this sense of God being at a young age. But I only went to church once. I was about 6. Mr. and Mrs. Zimmerman took me to the Church of the Nazarene in Worcester, Ohio, that many years ago. And one day I would become on staff at that church, which is just bizarre to think about. I didn't come to know Jesus until I was 20. I was invited to church by my Avon lady.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you never know what God will use. Just be open. Yeah. I got called into ministry at a singles retreat. I was watching back then they called them song evangelists, but they were definitely leading worship. And I just knew the Lord was saying, this is what I made you for. And so I ended up, long story short, ended up getting remarried. Dan is my second marriage. And we moved up to Kansas City, put me in school at Mid-America, came out of there with a music degree, just finished my master's degree last year at MVNU, and I'm a lifetime learner. I don't think I'll ever go back to school. Enough. but I will read books and listen to podcasts till the cows come home, as they say. I just know there's so much more to learn, and I love that. My ministry background, I actually ended up, like I say, at Worcester Church. It was kind of cool, those years of going from a church of about 150 in 3 years, exploded into about 800 by the time I left staff there, and they're growing strong. And it was a good place to learn. It was a really, really good place to learn and grow. I then started leading up at Bedford, up near Cleveland, for a few years, and ended up in a bad back accident, and I just had to let it go. I couldn't take the driving anymore. But then some years later, ended up down in Nashville, and we really thought the Lord was transplanting us in Nashville. So I moved on down and started leading worship at Gallatin, and 15 months later, it was just apparent this was not to be. Dan couldn't find the right job, and so I had to come back home. And when I was saying my husband is like the foundation, we were talking on the phone one night. He goes, "Okay, so you're coming home, coming back to Worcester, but you can't come home until you know what God wants you to do." Like, he was very firm about that. Like, stay down there until you hear and you know, because I know you're going to come home and feel defeated otherwise. And so that's where my nonprofit was born, Shelly Head Ministries, and I started going out, traveling, teaching, leading worship, doing seminars on worship, and just mentoring worship leaders. And it was really, really cool and growing until COVID.
Sure.
And I laid on my couch for months sobbing, convincing myself that God was done using me in worship ministries. I really thought I was finished. And it was just a really, really neat and sweet story how I ended up here at Shepherd, and it's just been very, very much a blessing. Cool. Yeah.
Well, hey, let's talk about Shepherd as we kind of get closer to wrapping up. So, what do you get to be a part of here at Shepherd, and some of the things that you love doing, and kind of where you see God moving right now?
Yeah. So I oversee the worship department, but there's no question Zach and I serve shoulder to shoulder. I mean, we do everything together. I mean, we're in separate offices, and we have our own work ethics and things we have to do, work sheets and such. But our strengths and weaknesses complement each other well. Yeah. We've figured out who's best at what things, and we've worked out a really good way of doing that. I will tell you that the very unique way God called us here has been such a blessing, because we see Shepherd as very much a multi-generational church, and the idea of being able to blend the past, the present, and the future, and being able to work together in those things and complementing those things has been really important to both of us. It's a blessed way to do ministry together. Yeah. I mean, that cooperation and that being willing to push and pull and hear each other's thoughts and ideas. And so, I love it. I love that guy.
Good. Well, hey, Shelly, I'm so thankful that you did this today. And hopefully we will get you back here sometime, if you'll do that. But we're going to wrap up our episode today. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Shepnaz podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your audio so you don't miss an episode. We're expecting great things. We hope that you'll continue to join us. As always, you can learn more about what's happening through our app, social media pages, and at shepnaz.org. Shelly, I'm Joey. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.
This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.